Alaikum. All right, well, Jazakallahu khair for coming to this very important presentation about Know Your Rights, presented by the North Carolina Muslim Bar Association. And we've done presentations like this before. You know, obviously when it comes to our interaction with the legal system, there's a lot that we have to know, especially as being Muslims in the United States. But in light of the recent events in Palestine, there's a lot of interest when it comes to our First Amendment right to freedom of speech and how we exercise this right. Now, obviously, as Muslims, we have the obligation to speak out when we see any injustice anywhere, especially when it comes to issues that affect the Ummah, of course. But the sad reality is that when it comes to... Okay. All right, Jazakallahu khair. So when it comes to speaking out for the rights of those in our brothers and sisters in Palestine, we know it's a very noble cause. It's something that we should do, but it's not always a popular thing, unfortunately, when it should be. But nevertheless, we have the right to speak, so we will do so, inshallah. A little bit about us. So we are both members of the board of the Muslim Bar Association. So my name is Nigel Edwards. I've been an attorney in this area since November 2011. And here we have with me here Sister Reem.
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Reem Subei. I am an attorney with Muslim Advocates, and of course I'm here with the North Carolina Muslim Bar Association. Thank you for joining us.
All right, so who are we? So we are a group of legal professionals in North Carolina. So in short, a bar association, it's simply an organization of those who are in the legal profession. The most obvious form of the bar association is every state or jurisdiction has a bar that dictates who can be an attorney, what it takes to be an attorney, how do you give an attorney a license to practice law. It's a regulated profession, so these are important things, of course. But you can also have bar associations that are based on other things, such as a common ethnic group, a common area of interest when it comes to an area of practice of law specifically, or even religious affiliation like the Muslims, of course. And so we established this back in August of 2020, and our goals are simple. We want to support the Muslim legal community in North Carolina, so a network of those in this field, and that includes even students. Alhamdulillah, we're seeing a lot more interest and young people wanting to enter the legal profession, which wasn't always the case, back when I was in law school, or before that even. Also increase the accessibility of legal services to those in our community. So for a lot of people, they want to have access to the legal system, but they feel out of place. They want a means of having a better chance of getting involved and exercising their rights through legal services, so we're an avenue for that. And also educating communities about the legal system, which is what we're doing today, of course. Now, the Muslim Bar Association is not a law firm. All right, so we do not take cases on and represent people for, financial compensation, nor are we a legal clinic. We don't do cases for free. We don't provide legal services or advice to those with specific cases. Now, of course, we're giving information about the legal system today, but we can't say, hey, sir, this is your case, do X, Y, and Z, and you'll get the result that you want. That is not the kind of organization that we are. However, as I mentioned before, we do try to connect people to those who can help them with their legal needs. So for those who are interested in terms of finding out information about maybe a Muslim attorney you want to get in touch with, or if you have an interest in law school, or you just have general questions about your rights that you may have here in the United States or this state or this city, whatever it may be, we have a website. We also have a direct email if you want to contact us with any questions that you have. So the goals for this evening are pretty simple. We want to identify the rights of freedom of speech. We want to talk about our responsibility when it comes to this right. Rights are good, but we also believe in responsibilities as Muslims. We need to know how to exercise this right, and especially in these times, we want to look at how do we handle the potential backlash that might occur when exercising this right. All right, so very simply, what is freedom of speech? Very simply, what is freedom of speech? Anyone? Say anything you want, right? So in short, that's a very good definition actually, and there's a lot more to it, of course, we're going to get into it, but the idea is that you can say what you want. Now, when it comes to the origins, where are we getting this from? Where's the proof or evidence behind this? So where do we get this idea that we can say everything we want in our legal system? Any guesses? Constitution, absolutely. So the Constitution, that's the supreme law of the land. It's the most important legal document in the United States. Any law that is created has to be in accordance with the US Constitution. It's enshrined within specifically the First Amendment of the US Constitution, of the Bill of Rights. And ultimately, that's what it says. You can say what you want. Now, that's the origin. When it comes to the rights, not everyone has the same rights in this country, of course. There are some rights that only some people have. If you want to vote, you have to be a US citizen to vote. If you want to register to vote, you have to be a US citizen to register to vote. But when it comes to the right of freedom of speech, how many people here think it only applies to US citizens? Show of hands. All right, how many people here think it applies to everyone living in the United States lawfully? All right, how many people here thinks that the right to freedom of speech applies to everyone living in the United States? All right, those who voted for option number 3, that's actually the correct answer. So this is one of those rights that is actually available to everyone living in the United States. Now, I'm spending time in this because the reality is for some people within our own community even, they come from places in the world where this is not a thing. You can't just say whatever you want. You don't have that right. And when they come to the United States, they feel as if they don't have the right to speak up when it comes to important issues. But this is one of those rights that everyone here does have. At the same time, we do have to caution when it comes to the consequences of exercising this right. Those consequences will be different depending on your immigration status.
Yeah, so when we talk about rights, there are rights that are protected under the law, and then there is practice. So while any person, regardless of their immigration status, is entitled to the same free speech protections under the law in the United States, that doesn't mean that an interaction with law enforcement officer is not a potential for arrest for someone who is undocumented. So we're going to talk to you about rights and laws, and we're going to also talk to you about strategies so that you can make sure that you are safe and your community members are protected.
All right, so we spoke earlier about the definition of freedom of speech, say whatever you want, but like any rule, like any law, there are going to be exceptions, of course. And so when it comes to freedom of speech, we'll speak more about those exceptions later, but in short, you can't say things that will put someone else into danger or threaten the welfare and safety of someone else. So if we're in a crowded place like a masjid and there's not a fire and someone yells fire, it's going to cause panic. That is obviously not something that is protected under the First Amendment freedom of speech. Likewise, along those same lines, when it comes to causing some kind of harm, if there is, for example, a designated foreign terrorist organization by the United States government and you're voicing support for that organization, that can be construed as something that will put someone in danger and will not be protected under the First Amendment.
Do we wait to the end to ask questions, or we can stop you or stop the lady with you and ask questions? You did not say how you want to handle it.
So halfway through, there will be a Q&A about everything that I've covered, and then Sister Reem will give her part of the presentation. There will be a Q&A at that point as well. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so we spoke about the right of freedom of speech. Now let's talk about our role and the responsibility that we have. We all know what is going on in Gaza right now. And the reality is we want to do so much. But of course, if you are here right now, we are not going to be over there carrying aid into Gaza. We're not going to be helping people avoid the bombardment that they're suffering through. But we do have an important role as people who are here in the United States. We have this right of freedom of speech, and we happen to be in the country that is the biggest supporter of the state that is enforcing policies that have punished and oppressed our Palestinian brothers and sisters. So with that being said, we do have the responsibility to speak out for those who are able to do so. But in terms of exercising this right, there's some very general advice. And this is advice that we can find in a lot of different traditions, even outside of the legal profession, from our own religious tradition as well. Think before you speak. Now, this is something that's very easy to think about, and we have to really enforce this. When it comes to the things that you say, we are going to be held accountable for anything that we say with our tongues. So it's always important that the things that we say are well thought of before they come out of our mouths. Now, obviously, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, he had this advice for people, and social media was not available, but the same applies to the modern forms of telecommunications that we have. It is so easy to write something down and post it, make it available to millions of people in an instant. So please make sure that you review the content of what you're sending out before it actually goes out. And the third piece of advice I'll offer that's very general is avoid speaking under certain circumstances. Now, this obviously is a very passionate issue for every single one of us. Either we have a spiritual connection with Philistine, or there are members of our community who are from Philistine who have families that are currently there. We are going to be very bothered by the things that are currently happening to our brothers and sisters. If we find ourselves in a situation where we are enraged by something that has happened, as things are constantly happening, that might not be the best time to immediately go to social media and post something. Not to say you can't speak at all about something that happens, but we as human beings, as thoughtful as we are, as much intellect that we have, we don't always make the best decisions, we don't always say the best things whenever we're in a situation where our emotions are running high. So just always take time to really understand if it's the right time to speak about something. All right, so we spoke a lot about our right to speak, but there are certainly times which we should remain silent. Now, we spoke earlier about the exceptions to freedom of speech. The general rule is you can say whatever you want, but the exception, of course, one of the exceptions is that you can't say something that puts someone else in danger. And we spoke about the idea of you can't voice your support for someone who is, for example, or a group or organization that's considered a terrorist organization. That is not something that's protected under free speech. The problem that we run into as Muslims, of course, is that we know very well that not everyone who is Palestinian is a terrorist. The sad reality is for many people, our very neighbors, they think that. There are some people who they simply see someone who is Muslim and they think they're a terrorist. This is nothing new to us. But of course, we know that we have the ability to support the cause of the Palestinian brothers and sisters and do so in a lawful way. But there are certain things that we can say that might be perceived differently from other people, including those in law enforcement. So upon voicing our support for the Palestinian cause, it's a likely possibility that some of us might be contacted by people in law enforcement, be it the local police, the federal authorities, FBI, whatever it may be. And so are we supposed to say whatever we want whenever we're approached by someone in law enforcement? And the answer is no. You know, you have the right to remain silent under the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution. When it comes to someone approaching you from law enforcement, you don't have to say anything. Now, we're good people. We're law-abiding people. And some people, there's this idea that just by remaining silent, you're proving your guilt. I'm telling you, you are not doing that. You are exercising the rights that many have fought and died for you to have. So please, do not feel bad, do not feel embarrassed if you choose to say nothing to a law enforcement officer who's approaching you asking questions. Along those same lines, you also have the right to attorney representation. If there is a law enforcement officer that is questioning you about something that you may have said, something you may have posted on social media, there is nothing wrong whatsoever by saying, please contact my attorney if you have any questions whatsoever. And by law, that law enforcement officer can then not reach out to you unless your attorney is present for questions. We're gonna do some role playing and kind of talk about how things should go if a law enforcement officer approaches you. I'll be playing the role of Agent Smith, and Sister Reem will be playing the role of Sister Reem. Reem, right?
Yes.
Oh, my name is Agent Smith. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So I kind of came across some stuff. I have some questions about things that I saw you post on Facebook the other day. I'm pretty sure it's nothing bad, but let's go down to headquarters and talk about it. How about that?
Am I under arrest?
You're not under arrest right now, but you could be. So let's just go down to the station and kind of talk about these things.
Am I free to leave?
I guess you're free to leave. Are you sure you want to leave?
Yes, I'm leaving.
All right. I guess we'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right, so what Sister Reem did was excellent. All right, she exercised her right to remain silent. She made it very clear that she was not going to go with me to my office to speak without someone being present, of course, or not at all. And the reality is, if you saw my way of questioning, this is a very common thing that you see from some law enforcement officers, and it can be intimidating. They will ask you questions, but it seems as if they were telling you what is going to happen. And guess what? If you fall for it and you simply go along with it and you say things that might be used against you later in a case, the law is pretty clear that you came willingly. It doesn't matter if you think or you thought that you had to go. The law is pretty clear that you had the ability to remain silent at that point and not go, but you did not exercise that right. So everything that Sister Reem said was absolutely excellent. Are there any questions at all at this point? Brother Jihad, yes.
First, can you hear me? You can try for me. Give me 3 minutes. First, I would like to thank the IAR management for doing this. This is wonderful. And I would like also to thank Muammar for his khutbah today. It was fantastic. Second, my name is Jihad Shawa. I am from Gaza Strip, and I bet that you know where is Gaza Strip. I have few family members that are lost, but all Gaza are my family, okay? The third thing is, I wanted to thank Nigel for his leadership that he is doing in our community. And I want to tell him what he's doing is unbelievable. I have went to the website for North Carolina Muslim Association, and unfortunately, as much I was dreaming of seeing, I didn't see anything that made my dream come true. You're the vice president. I'm so proud. Who is the president? Okay. This bar association, it is very essential if you guys work on it and make reference and make things happen. We have such a... I can't hear you, so I'm sorry. Let me finish my question, okay, please. So, Nigel, please work on that. It is very, very essential for us as Muslim community. And there's a lot to do. There are politicians, there are lawyers, there are business people who are attorneys. And I'm sure that you've done that, and you know that. So please, make it happen, Nigel. The third thing is, you mean a non-citizen would have the right to stand up and say, Biden policy sucks? Do you think I can stand up and say that, should I say the Jewish people or the Israeli people, and then I won't be accused of being anti-Semitism? That's my questions. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, Jazakallahu khair. So on that note, we also are planning on having a section on our website for local attorneys in private practice in different areas of law. And that will be a resource for people who want a Muslim attorney who does immigration, who does business law, who does criminal law, and so forth. So that is coming, inshallah. In terms of the backlash of the comments that you say, to answer your first question though, yes, you do have the right to say it. But there are consequences when it comes to the things that you say. And a lot of that will actually be covered under Sister Reem's presentation. Yeah. Any other questions about the first part of the presentation? Well, there'll be more time in the end, so we'll go into the second part of the presentation.
So can we go with the officer to the office or not? If he wanted to take us after that conversation, should we go or should we say we are going? If you want to take me, you have to talk to my attorney first.
Yes, certainly the latter. So, Imam Badwi was asking, should we go to the office with the law enforcement officer who asked us to go? They're asking, right? They're not telling, right? So if you were actually under arrest, that's a different issue. And to be under arrest, and this can be a whole presentation in itself, but to be under arrest, there needs to be a cause to arrest you, a probable cause. So if you obviously have a gun and you're about to shoot someone, yes, that's cause to arrest somebody, right? An officer is not going to ask to arrest you under those circumstances. But if they're investigating something that you are simply saying on social media, they are asking to question you. And under those circumstances, you do not go with them. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, if an officer is asking to question you or asking to go to his or her office to question you, you have the right to say no. No, if they're asking questions and they're doing it as a part of an investigation, no, they can't arrest you. There's no cause to arrest you.
I was stopped by a police officer in the vicinity of Muslim mosque. And then 6 police officers they came and they said, we want you out. I did not get out. Then someone came and started screaming and threatening me that I'm going to jail. They said, we gonna take you to jail. Do they have the right to say that? Or what rights do I have?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to the very beginning of the presentation where we can't offer direct legal advice to people. So I'm really sorry, brother, but we can't really go directly into your specific case. I know brother here had a question.
What is the possible way, like a thing you can send to like for a police officer to ask him and ask him to so you can go to his office?
So the question was, what is something that could be said to the police officer that would make them actually take you into their office forcibly or arrest you? So while you do have the right to remain silent, you cannot tell lies to an officer. That's a crime by itself. All right, so that is something that could put you in jeopardy and cause you to be arrested if you're telling a lie to an officer. So if you don't want to give an officer your name, you can just say, I'm not going to give you my name. You can't just make up a name and give it to them, though.
There's another one. Man, here. You want to have a question? No, wait. I'll give it to you. Here. Come on.
So guys, in this video, I want you to just, I'm gonna make a video, all right? So anyways, I'm basically gonna make videos about any of stuff, whatever I want, and Jenna, I can looking at it, whatever I want, what my brother told me, and anyways, what I need to say, free Palestine.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother, for your support.
Before I start, Nigel, you spoke about the fact that lying to a law enforcement officer is a crime. Are law enforcement officers permitted to lie to us?
Short answer, yes.
So whenever you're speaking to law enforcement, they can lie to you, but you are committing a crime if you lie to them, which is one of the main reasons that we advise people to not speak to law enforcement officials unless you have an attorney present. It's really important for you to have an attorney present when engaging with law enforcement officers, whether that be the police, whether that be the FBI, or any other law enforcement officer. So before I get into my presentation, I just want to ask some of the women in the back to join us up here because I feel left out by myself with the men. So if you may please join us. More women up in the front, please, to the extent that you're comfortable with it. Thank you, Salam. So we're really grateful to have you with us, and we're grateful for you having us here. As I present, and as you heard Nigel present, we're going to talk to you about various laws, but that doesn't mean that that necessarily is how that law applies in everyday practice. So the law is something that's written on the books, and it is there to protect your rights. And law enforcement, universities, public universities, that is, and other entities are required to comply with the law. All universities, all schools, all individuals, you all are required to comply with the law. But if someone violates the law, such as a police officer arresting you unlawfully, you were just sitting, you had not committed a crime, you didn't do anything wrong, you didn't incite violence, but a police officer shows up and arrests you, okay? Exactly. You don't know whether they're engaging in lawful activity or not. That is exactly the point, which is why we want to make sure that you take away from our presentations that it is still your duty to comply, to not resist arrest. So if a law enforcement officer arrests you, you are not to resist arrest, because that could and would likely lead to a different crime, which is resisting arrest, and could cause you and your family significant harm. The main right that no law enforcement officer is going to be able to force you to do pending the arrival of an attorney is speaking, which is the most important right that you have the ability to exercise as you're waiting for your attorney or as you are interacting with law enforcement officers. If law enforcement officers order you to leave a location or arrest you and take you with them, or tell you you are detained or you are under arrest, regardless of whether you understand the reasons underlying that arrest, or even if you know that the law enforcement officer is discriminating against you or is treating you differently because you wear hijab or because you're Muslim, you have to comply with the law enforcement officer. In the meantime, you do not have to speak to law enforcement officials. I know we've said that like 10 times within the past few minutes, but it's really important that you don't speak to law enforcement without your attorneys present. And that exercise that Nigel and I engaged in is actually a simplistic version, because law enforcement officials are trained to get you to talk. Oftentimes they will approach you in an intimidating way, but sometimes they'll approach you in a very friendly way, which means that the FBI could knock on your door at home and be really nice to you. And I have interacted with some of those individuals, and they are some of the seemingly nicest people. They're well-dressed, they're eloquent, they're well-spoken, they're smiling. And they tell you, we just want to have a chat to protect you, or to protect your masjid, or to protect your community. We're not going to get into whether they're telling you the truth or not. Whether you want to speak with them or not, you should not do that without an attorney present. That doesn't mean that you need to get aggressive or loud or violent with them. It just means that you can politely inform them that you are exercising your right to remain silent. I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I will only speak with my attorney present. And you can ask for their card if you would like to call them back. And then you can have a particularized special conversation with your attorney about whether it is advisable to talk to them, what your immigration status situation is, how that might help you, how that might harm you. It's a very detailed analysis that you will get into on a case-by-case basis that we're not going to be able to get into over here. I also want to outline that while we're talking about legal advice, one of the most important tools that you have at your fingertips to change policy and to impact the way that things operate in this country is by organizing, by building power, and by lobbying, which means by speaking to your elected officials, by calling your city council members, by calling your North Carolina governor, by calling your elected congressperson, your elected senator. You have federal and state elected officials on both sides, and it is really important that you engage with those individuals if you have any particular asks for them to implement. That also includes engagement with your university dean. That also includes engagement with your teachers or your children's teachers. Whatever change you are attempting to bring about, the law is one aspect of it, and we're not able over here to we're not able as attorneys to be immediately present to enable you to make that change on the grounds. You're going to have to attempt to build that power to organize, and lawyers are going to be able to bring change in court. So I'm going to try to talk about all of these various topics in my presentation if we have time for it, and if not, then we will certainly be able to cut it short and open it up for questions. Nigel already talked about the United States Constitution and the First Amendment right to free speech. It's really important that we are cognizant of the fact that while the United States Constitution exists to protect everyone, there are some limitations on that Constitution. Nigel talked about some of those limitations. There are two sides of limitations, two categories. One limitation pertains to the place and the entity that you're dealing with. For example, if you are attending a private school that does not receive federal funding, that entity is not going to be governed by the United States Constitution. I'm realizing as I say that this is too much legalese. However, the important takeaway from this is if you are dealing with an entity and you're not sure whether your rights are being violated, you should contact an attorney. You should reach out to someone who can help you analyze whether your rights are being protected or being violated. I'm getting a sign from the imam.
Excuse me, with due respect, if your kids around the musalla and they are not behaving good, or if you want to have some energy, please give the rights for those who come in to share the benefits and they want to listen to the benefits to get the most of the benefit, inshallah ta'ala. So please, mashallah, the campus is huge, the gym is back there. We can have this energy outside of the musalla, inshallah, so we can focus with the rights and we get benefit as much as we can, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a question. If you were at a protest on the street in a public place, you were protesting pro-Palestine, and then a group showed up and they wanted to protest pro-Israel, are they allowed to stand in the same location where you're standing? Or can you tell them that they have to leave? Okay, you can tell them, you can ask them nicely, but they have the right to stand there as much as you do. However, the other question is, if there was a pro-Israel rally, okay, and you showed up and you had all your friends and you wanted to protest pro-Palestine, and the police said, you have to stand on the other side of the street, you cannot stand right here next to the pro-Palestine protesters. You can stand just a couple feet over on the other side. Is the police permitted to tell you that?
Yes.
If you think the police are permitted to do that, you should raise your hand. If you think they're not, keep your hand down. They're not. Wait, they are. Sorry. Wait. Hold on. I think I did a double negative here. So the police are permitted to tell you to move to the other side, while those individuals and you are both permitted to exercise your rights. So you can show up and want to stand next to them, or they can show up and want to stand next to you. You can do whatever you want, okay? Just because they asked you does not mean you have to leave. But if the police came and said that we are going to create a divide between the two parties, the police are permitted to do that. Now, if they said, today we're preserving Raleigh for only pro-Israel protesters, you can go protest in Charlotte, they're not allowed to do that.
The police has the right to tell you to move to the other side, and you did not.
What do you think is going to happen? You're going to get arrested. Yeah. Yes. So that's a really good close to the loop. The police is permitted to separate people when their rationale is reasonable protection. So if there are protesters who are protesting, for example, pro-Biden or pro-Trump, and they're both intermingling and being aggressive with each other, the police are allowed to enforce some rational protections to ensure that everybody's safety is protected.
So what happened if he arrested you? What happened to me after he arrested you?
So when he arrests you, guess what you're going to do? You're going to remember that we had this presentation, and you're not going to talk. You will exercise your right to remain silent, and you will tell them that you will only speak with your attorney present, okay? The other thing that the police is not, I'm sorry, let me just finish the slide, and then I'll let you ask more questions.
Am I going to go to jail, or what's going to happen? Please, give me the whole scenario.
Right. If you resist arrest, or you refuse to comply with a lawful order of the police have the right to arrest you. When they arrest you, they're going to detain you. They're going to probably put you in jail. There's a difference between jail and prison. They might keep you there for a few minutes. You might get bail. We're not going to get into the details of that. As soon as you get taken in, hopefully you will not, but you will call your lawyer, and someone will show up and help you get out as soon as possible. But there's a whole process that can happen after that we're not going to get into just right now. But thank you, that's a really good question. I'm happy to chat about it after. We just have to get through the presentation. So we talked about when and where speech is protected. The other thing I want to mention, and which was just asked, which is what to do if you're stopped. You're going to exercise your right to remain silent. You also have the right to not permit law enforcement to go through your phone. So if law enforcement wants to go through your phone, you should not give them permission to do so, which means that you're going to say no, which means that you're going to make sure that before you go to a protest where there might be risk of law enforcement being present, you're going to ensure that your phone has a password on it, right? However, if law enforcement takes your phone away, we are not advising you to resist them from taking your phone away. You do not want to get into a physical altercation with law enforcement. And then we're talking about political considerations. I believe there was a question earlier about, how do I speak in a manner that ensures I'm not accused of being anti-Semitic? There are so many details that we can get into about that, and there are so many suggestions and recommendations for best practices of speech that we're going to try to chat about here in a little bit. But you have to understand that while, again, there are laws, there are practical considerations. And the reality is we do live in a world that is very similar right now to the world that is post 9/11. I want to make sure that I don't instill fear in anyone, which I'm probably already doing. But you have rights, and you have the right to exercise them. We also want you to be safe, and we also want your community to be safe. So when speaking, you are able to criticize the actions of Israel without engaging in speech that could be interpreted as supporting the acts of a terrorist organization. And when I say a terrorist organization, that is an official designation that is afforded by the United States government. It's not one that I decide or you decide. If the United States government has designated an entity a terrorist organization, and you provide material support for that entity, that will lead to criminal. Well, you should not provide material support to an entity that's been designated a terrorist organization, because that is a crime and could lead to prosecution. I saw a question up there.
I can't even walk.
When speaking to people, either in person or online, or protesting, how do you reconcile the fact that the UN gives us, recognizes the rights of people to resist occupation, while at the same time not getting in trouble and for being supportive of Hamas?
Okay. So as Nigel was talking about free speech restrictions, I want to emphasize that there are restrictions. I'm going to answer your question as soon as I lay out the outline of the restrictions of free speech. There are restrictions on free speech. For example, you're not allowed to engage in defamation. Does anyone know what defamation is? Okay. Is it something true that they did, or it's not true? It does. So if it's false, then that's not permitted, and they can file a claim against you in civil court, and also that speech is not protected. If you are speaking about someone in a fashion that is absolutely correct and accurate, and they have exactly done that act of which you are speaking publicly about them doing, even if it's a negative to their character, you are permitted to do that. You're within your rights to do that. The other portion of speech that's not protected is obscenity, blackmail, so threatening someone, true threats, if you engage in a true threat against someone, or speech that incites imminent violence or law-breaking. So if I tell you, I think you should go set this mosque on fire, that is not protected speech if, that is not protected speech. There are more details to how and when you might get prosecuted for it. However, you should not be engaging in speech that incites violence or lawbreaking. The other form of speech that is not protected at a school is speech that results in and is reasonably foreseeable to result in substantial disruption or material interference. So for example, if you set up a flash mob, so you're on the grounds, all the students are on the ground, they're demonstrating what the Palestinians are going through throughout the entire day at school. You don't allow any teachers to get through any class materials. You don't allow them to speak. You don't allow any students to go to their classes. That is a substantial disruption of the school's activities. Even if you are attending a public school, and even though free speech protects you, you are not permitted to substantially interfere with the operations of that entity. And then free speech, the government, which includes public entities, is permitted to have neutral policies. What are neutral policies? It's the example I gave you before. A neutral policy is one that says people who are protesting for Palestine should stand on the right and people who are protesting for Israel should stand on the left. These are neutral policies. They are permitted. Another thing that you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to block traffic, for example, right? So you're allowed to protest on the side of the road, but you can't have everybody blocking traffic because you're interfering with the operations of everybody that's trying to pass to the other side or drive somewhere else. So I want to now address the question, which, so being anti-Semitic or being against Muslims is not directly what makes your speech fall outside the realms of free speech, okay? So free speech as a theory, as a law that protects you so long as you are operating within the confines of the outlined points, okay? That doesn't mean that you should say things that are anti-Semitic or anti-Muslims or Islamophobic or any. No. Right. Right. I'm gonna get to that, but I just wanted to clarify there is the law which actually protects you even if you are saying something, for example, that is hateful toward people, which I want to take that point to say that other people might also say something hateful towards you, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are committing a crime. Now, you're asking a more strategic question, which is how do I engage in this conversation, which is actually the whole point of this event and is more important than all of the laws that we're talking about. So thank you for asking that. If you want, we can do a demonstration on that, and you can be the person who is asking me questions, and I can answer the questions in a fashion that ensures that you're communicating the message appropriately and that you are not appeasing the other side. So I'm gonna come to you, and we're gonna demonstrate this. Yeah, I'll get to him right after. Okay. So you're going to ask me questions that people often ask you or ask anyone that are attempting to frame Muslims as being anti-Semitic or that are attempting to derail the conversation from what you want to communicate, which is that there is an illegal occupation happening. So you're gonna ask me, and then I'm gonna answer, and we'll see how I do, and then Nigel can grade me.
Why do pro-Palestinian protesters come out in support of Palestinians who are killing Israelis?
Actually, the Palestinians are not killing Israelis. The Palestinians are attempting to live. They are being attacked. They have lost so many lives. The majority of the Palestinians in Gaza are children, and all they want is to have a safe life. They want to have safe homes, and they want to have access to food and water. They are not engaging in the killing of anyone.
Why did they elect people who went into Israel to kill civilians?
Who is they? Who elected people, and what people are you talking about?
Why did Palestinians elect Hamas?
Well, actually, Palestinians did not elect Hamas. There were some people in Gaza that elected Hamas one time, so many years ago. But Hamas has no control over the West Bank, which Israel continues to impose its unlawful restrictions and oppression on.
Do you agree with Palestinians who are fighting for their freedom?
Do you agree with people killing Palestinians? I don't know how to answer your question. And I think it's an unfair question for you to ask me that. I believe that all people should have the right to fight for their freedom in a fashion that is lawful and that does not attack the lives of other people.
Why do people chant Palestine, free Palestine from the river to the sea? Does that mean they're trying to destroy Israel?
This is not about destroying anyone. Also, this is not a conversation that the Palestinians or Muslims are having pertaining to nation states. What Palestinians want is access to free rights and the ability to live equally with everybody else. They want the entirety of the space to have equal rights for everyone. That includes Muslims, that includes Christians, that includes Jews, that includes every person should have the right to freely exist and live their lives with dignity and respect and receive equal treatment in the area and across the world. Okay. Okay.
What do you think, kids?
So, if that's true, what you're saying, why don't the Palestinians just surrender the members of Hamas who are sheltering within Gaza?
Okay. Well, I have been in cities where there were some people who were committing crimes. I didn't know where they are here in America. I didn't know where they are, and I didn't have any ability to make those people go to law enforcement. It's something that is outside the realms of control of the Palestinians. It's unrealistic for you to expect or to ask or to think that normal civilians have any control over individuals or engaging in any activity that pertains to holding arms.
Since I know that Gaza is not that big and with a population of over 2 million people in such a small area, someone has to know where Hamas are hiding. There's not much place where they can actually hide without no one knowing where they are.
So I'm gonna, I forgot that I went too long with this exercise. I'm gonna answer your question as well. You can't, these questions never end, right? The reality is people are gonna keep asking you questions. And guess what? You don't have to answer their questions. And you can ask them questions too. Why don't you ask them, why does Israel occupy Palestine in a fashion that has been held illegal by the United Nations and by other nations? Why is it doing that? Do you know why they're doing that? They're gonna say, well, I don't know. Well, you can say, well, I don't know why the Palestinians are doing what they're doing. I'm not the spokesperson for all of the Palestinians. I saw your hand up for a while, I'm sorry.
You can actually use the
I'm not bothered. It doesn't matter. Okay. So I can. First, Jazakallah, this is a really excellent event, Brother Nigel. I just want to say again, Jazakallah for all the effort and the work you're doing in the community and your association as well. I just had Drew, one really quick question and a second question. The first one is you mentioned about if you do go to protest and you take your cell phone with you, that you should ensure that it's password locked. But what if it's coupled with biometrics, like people have, FaceTime, face recognition, or the biometric with the thumbprints? So that's one question. And the second one is, a lot of people, subhanAllah, this period of what we're seeing in Palestine is unlike any other. And a lot of people at work, we see like CEOs and people at work posting these, we condemn the killing of Israeli citizens, Israeli innocent citizens, and they never mention anything about Palestine. And so we have a number of people who are starting to reply to CEOs, to HR, to all these people and say, hey, we also condemn the loss of innocent Palestinian lives. And some of them are facing harassment after they do that. So what is their rights as far as at work? What can they do if some of them get fired or begin to getting harassed? Is that only an HR thing, or do they have any legal rights?
Yeah, so for the first part of the question, when it comes to information that can be used against you in a criminal investigation, obviously anything that you offer voluntarily is fair game. So if you give your cell phone to someone and it's not a password on it, the police officer looks at the stuff in the cell phone, that's fair game. Now when it comes to the biometrics, if something is in plain view, that's one thing. So if you have a gun and it's peeping out of your jacket and a police officer sees that, that's evidence that's in plain view, and that knowledge of that gun being there can be used against you in an investigation, of course. But the same can't be said, in my opinion, about a phone that's locked with biometrics. That would require the police having to forcefully get you to unlock the phone. And that's not in plain view. So I don't see how that evidence would at least be admissible in an investigation against you. They might see it, but when it comes to actually using it against you in an actual case they're constructing to prosecute you for, I don't see that happening, right? Now, in terms of the employment situation, this is a very big concern for a lot of people in our community. You know, when it comes to our participation and the companies that we work for, we do want to be team players. We want to be people who are patriotic. But of course, when it comes to this specific issue, we're going to be at odds with a lot of people who are around us, people that we work with and so forth. HR, of course, they have their own policies, but then there are also rights that you have when it comes to federal rights and your rights as a worker. The biggest thing that you can do is when it comes to any kind of discrimination that you feel like you've experienced, any issue, is to document that. And then you do have a right to file a complaint with the federal government, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC. But the most important thing that they often say, this federal agency, is that cases are unsuccessful when people don't have the information for them, right? So when it comes to any incident that you have, please, please be specific. What incident was it? When the incident happened? Who was involved? Because if you want the government to work for you, to fight for you if you're being discriminated against, you have to have the evidence to give to them. They're not going to give it for you.
Yes, real quick question, please. Do you have right to record or video a conversation with a police officer?
Yes, you do. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll see how much got picked up from today's recording. I know I was told it's going to be recorded and put on the IER's YouTube channel. And if possible, we can put the link there. So we'll definitely get permission to do that, inshallah. Live stream.
I have a question. So I work in a department that is, I mean, 3/4 Israeli citizens. And way before this situation between Palestine and Israel, I've already been facing discrimination. And since this started, I do not feel safe going to work or even going to the supermarket because I'm getting looks as if I'm killing someone and hate speech and everything. So what rights do I have, or how do I feel safer and be able to protect myself, for example, going to work? Because like I said, mostly Israeli citizens. In my department, I'm the only Muslim. And ever since I started working 2 years ago, I've already been in exile, and they've deemed me a terrorist from day one.
Yeah, so I've got some bad news for you. You know, when it comes to feeling safer, there's not a whole lot that we can do under the law itself. The law is very good about protecting people's rights. If you have the documentation available, the proof to your disposal, and you're wronged in some way, there's a measure of recourse in the court of law that can assist you. But for a lot of people who have been through traumatic experiences, I don't know if the law can really make that go away, to be very honest about it, right? But the important thing is to take full advantage of the rights that you do have. And it might not make you feel 100%, but the whole point is to be the best you can when it comes to still existing and overcoming the struggles that are put before you.
I think there is only 3 minutes left. You have any more time for one question?
So I think that's it, because we do need to go ahead and make the salah and make the aqam and the adhan as well. So jazakallahu khair to everyone. Thank you for coming.
Nigel. Thank you, Miss. Let me have you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.